"Cut the chain, or I'll call the sheriff." That's the line I found myself spitting out, standing in the early morning sun, staring at a smug little padlock holding back everything I'd worked for. Now, if you're picturing some rusted farm gate with creaky hinges, you're wrong. This thing was brand new, black iron bars with ornamental spikes, the kind of gate you'd expect outside a Beverly Hills mansion. Only this wasn't Beverly Hills. It was the dusty road leading to my family campground. And right in the middle of it, hanging slightly crooked on a silver chain, was a shiny sign that read, "Private residents only. Trespassers will be towed." I laughed out loud at first because, honestly, it felt like a prank. But the laughter soured when my phone buzzed with back-to-back calls from campers who couldn't get in. Families who'd driven hours, SUVs loaded with coolers and kayaks, sitting in line at a gate that shouldn't even exist. I didn't have to guess who was behind it. The name was practically engraved on that smug little "Residents Only" sign. Marlene Whitmore, president of the Lakeside Vista Homeowners Association. Marlene was a tall, brittle woman with the kind of posture that made you think she swallowed a yardstick as a child. She wore pearls to mow her lawn and treated every HOA meeting like a Broadway performance. And now, apparently, she had decided that my campground traffic, paying guests, mind you, was a threat to her community aesthetic. 2 days earlier, I'd found a folded letter taped to my mailbox. Cream-colored stationery, embossed with the HOA's logo like they were the Vatican. Inside, Marlene had typed up a neat little decree about excessive campground traffic infringing upon residential peace. She cited a handful of bylaws, none of which actually applied to me, and ended with her signature in bold blue ink, like a queen stamping her seal. At the time, I rolled my eyes and tossed it into the glove box. I didn't realize she'd skipped right past diplomacy and gone full medieval, erecting her own iron curtain. I stepped out of my truck, gravel crunching under my boots, and gave the gate a shove. Solid. The chain rattled against the post like it was laughing at me. Beyond it, the road wound down toward the lake, lined with pine trees already whispering in the fall breeze. That road had carried generations of campers into my family's land. It was our artery, our lifeline. And now, thanks to Marlene, it was clogged. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Her voice floated over before I even saw her. There she was, in full regalia. Wide-brimmed sun hat, khaki capris, and that HOA president smirk that could curdle milk. She stood with 2 board members at her side like backup dancers in a suburban music video. "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "You can move your gate." "This gate," she replied, placing one hand dramatically on the iron bar, "was unanimously approved by the Lakeside Vista HOA board. It is necessary to protect the safety and tranquility of our residents. We cannot have random outsiders barreling down our road at all hours." I raised an eyebrow. "You do realize this road leads to my property?" Marlene tilted her head, pretending to think. "The residents have voted, and frankly, your campground guests are disruptive. We've had complaints of noise, of campfire smoke, of unsightly trailers passing through. It's damaging our property values." There it was. Property values, the HOA's holy scripture. I leaned in slightly. "Marlene, let me be clear. You cannot block access to my land." She gave a tight smile, clearly rehearsed in her bathroom mirror. "If you believe there's a legal matter, you're free to consult your attorney, but until then, this gate stays." I could feel my phone buzzing again in my pocket. Another camper, probably ready to cancel. My blood pressure ticked upward. She wanted me to back down, to get tangled in paperwork and letters while she sat on her throne. That was her game. Death by red tape. But here's the thing about Marlene. She didn't know the one detail that changed everything. She thought I owned a patch of dirt at the end of her fancy lakeside road. What she didn't know was that the entire road, and the woods, and the land her precious HOA was built on were mine. Every last deed. I didn't say it then. Not yet. Because in that moment, I realized something. She was writing me into her drama, and every play needs an audience. So I let her monologue. I let her gavel bang and cite her fake bylaws while my campers sat fuming at the gate. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of her standing proudly in front of the gate. Her smile faltered when she heard the click. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Just documenting," I said, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "You know, for when this ends up in front of the county." Her smirk returned, but it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. "You do what you have to do." I climbed back into my truck, fired up the engine, and rolled down the window just enough for her to hear me. "Enjoy your gate, Marlene. It won't be standing long." As I drove off, my phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from a furious father who'd booked 3 sites for his kid's birthday weekend. I pressed play, listening to his frustration boil over, and I knew I couldn't let this slide. Marlene had no idea she'd just started a war she couldn't win. And the best part, the battlefield was mine. "Order! Order!" Marlene's voice cracked like a whip, her gavel slamming the folding table so hard the styrofoam coffee cups rattled. For a moment, you'd think we were inside the U.S. Capitol instead of the Lakeside Vista Clubhouse, with its faint smell of lemon cleaner and stale donuts. The room was packed, shoulder to shoulder, neighbors fanning themselves with HOA newsletters, muttering under their breath like it was Sunday service, and they were waiting for the sermon to turn scandalous. And at the pulpit stood Marlene, her pearls catching the fluorescent light, savoring every ounce of attention. I'd come to this meeting half out of curiosity, half out of strategy, but mostly to watch her dig her own hole, because Marlene wasn't just playing president tonight, she was playing queen, and her kingdom was restless. Now, I'm no stranger to HOA politics. They thrive on paper trails, certified letters, citations for trash cans left out an extra day, or strongly worded notes about grass exceeding 3 inches in height. But this wasn't about lawns or mailboxes anymore. Marlene had elevated my campground into the HOA's enemy number 1, and she was ready to weaponize every bylaw she could twist. She stood tall behind the table, gavel still in hand like a conductor's baton. "The board has received numerous complaints," she announced, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. "Campground traffic has become a menace, vehicles barreling through at unsafe speeds, smoke from campfires polluting our air, strangers loitering near our dock." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. I recognized the cast. Mr. Patterson, the retired dentist who measured his grass with a ruler, the Collins family who never missed an HOA meeting because they lived for gossip, and a dozen others who secretly resented Marlene but were too afraid to say so. I raised my hand. "Point of order, Madam President." Her jaw tightened. "You are not a resident, Mr. Lane. You are a guest here." "Funny," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Last I checked, guests don't pay property taxes on half the land you're sitting on." I got a few sideways glances, but Marlene plowed ahead, ignoring me like I was an annoying commercial break. She waved a stack of papers, HOA bylaws, dog-eared and highlighted like scripture. "Section 14, Nuisance Restrictions," she read, her voice ringing with self-importance. "The board reserves the right to restrict activities that disrupt the peaceful enjoyment of residents. I propose we adopt a resolution requiring campground traffic to register with the HOA before entering community property." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others muttering. Register with the HOA? My paying guests signing in with Marlene like schoolchildren asking permission for recess. It was absurd, but she said it with such conviction that a few neighbors actually nodded. I let her revel in the applause for a moment, then stood. My chair scraped against the tile, the sound slicing through the chatter. "Let me save everyone some time," I said. "Your community property? That road you keep calling yours? It's mine. Check the county plat map if you don't believe me." Gasps, whispers, a few awkward coughs. Marlene's face froze, then rearranged itself into a tight-lipped smile. "Mr. Lane," she said sweetly, "we're not here to debate ownership. We're here to protect the integrity of our neighborhood." That's when I realized her power wasn't in the bylaws. It was in the theater. She knew if she could get her neighbors riled up enough, the truth wouldn't matter. It was perception versus paperwork. And in her world, perception always won. She pivoted to the audience like a preacher at revival. Do we want strangers tearing down our streets? Do we want property values to plummet because of unregulated traffic? Do we want Lakeside Vista to become a campground? No! Half the room cried in unison, like trained choir members. I couldn't help but laugh, which earned me daggers from every pearl-wearing retiree in the front row. Fine, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. Keep your little resolution. Pass all the bylaws you want. But when you put it on paper that you control that road, you'll have to explain to the county why you've been regulating land you don't own. Marlene's gavel came down again, rattling the donuts this time. You are out of order, Mr. Lane. But the tension had shifted. I saw it in the way a few neighbors exchanged nervous looks, in the way Mr. Patterson leaned over to whisper something to his wife. Doubt had cracked the facade. The meeting dragged on for another hour, Marlene dictating motions, her board nodding like bobbleheads. They passed their resolution, of course unanimously. But I stayed quiet, letting them congratulate themselves, watching Marlene bask in the illusion of victory. Because here's the thing, HOA votes don't rewrite county deeds. And Marlene was about to find out just how small her kingdom really was. As the crowd filtered out, I lingered by the back wall, letting the lemon cleaner sting my nose, waiting until the room thinned. Marlene caught my eye as she packed up her papers, her smirk still firmly in place. You're finished, she hissed, low enough for only me to hear. This community doesn't want you here. I smiled, leaning in just enough for her perfume, something powdery and sharp, to hit my nose. Then you're really going to hate what comes next. Her smirk faltered just for a second, but it was enough. I walked out into the cool night air, crickets chirping in the trees, the glow of the HOA clubhouse fading behind me. The road stretched ahead, quiet and dark, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. Not after what I had planned. Marlene's face drained of color when the county clerk slid the plat map across the table. Her manicured hand froze mid-gesture, the pen she'd been using to scribble notes rolling silently onto the tile. For weeks, she had strutted through HOA meetings like a general leading troops into battle. She'd waved bylaws like swords, ordered gates like fortifications, and rallied her neighbors with sermons about protecting property values. But here, in the stale air of the county records office, all her armor cracked at once. The truth wasn't a matter of opinion anymore. It was black ink on yellowed paper, stamped and signed decades ago, and every square inch of her kingdom, the road, the dock, the pool house, was on my deed. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't waltz into the records office just to humiliate her. I went because after weeks of games it was time to stop arguing feelings and start dealing in facts. Campers had canceled their stays. My revenue had dipped. And Marlene had gone from annoying neighbor to financial liability. But I admit, when the clerk unfolded that map and laid it out like a general's war chart, I enjoyed the moment more than I should have. The room was painfully ordinary. Beige walls, humming fluorescent lights, the faint smell of toner from the copy machine, yet the tension was electric. Marlene sat stiff in her chair, pearls glinting under the harsh light. Two of her board members flanked her, whispering nervously. Across from them, I sat with my arms folded, calm as a stone. The clerk, a middle-aged man with reading glasses perched on his nose, tapped the map with his pen. As you can see, the parcel lines are clear. The road in question, the clubhouse extension, and the lakeside dock all sit within Mr. Lane's property boundaries. There's no dispute here. Marlene's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at her allies for backup, but they looked just as pale as she did. Finally, she managed, There must be some mistake. The HOA has maintained these areas for years. They're part of our community. The clerk shook his head. Maintenance doesn't equal ownership. You've been using Mr. Lane's land, whether you realized it or not. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. What he's saying, Marlene, is that you built your little empire on rented ground, and you never bothered to check who the landlord was. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Even the copy machine in the corner seemed to stop whirring. She tried again, her voice sharper now. You can't just waltz in and claim half our amenities. This community has invested money, our dues, into those facilities. They belong to the residents. I smiled, slow and deliberate. They belong to me, and technically, you've been trespassing. Her eyes widened. For the first time, the indestructible Marlene Whitmore looked small. Now, I wasn't cruel. I didn't slam my fist on the table or demand they pack up their tennis nets that instant. Instead, I let the silence stretch, then said, "Here's the thing. I don't want to shut down your dock or bulldoze your clubhouse, but I could. One phone call to a fence company, and I could box in this whole neighborhood. Your shiny gate? It would keep you in, not me out." One of the board members, Mr. Collins, the HOA's treasurer, cleared his throat. "Surely we can come to some arrangement." "Exactly," I said, turning to him. "An arrangement. From now on, the HOA doesn't dictate who uses that road. You don't regulate my guests. You don't post signs. And in return, I don't start charging you rent for the land under your precious amenities." Marlene snapped back to life, her voice tight. "You're extorting us." "No," I said, still calm. "I'm giving you a deal. The kind of deal most landlords give tenants. The only difference is, you didn't know you were tenants until today." The clerk, sensing the tension boiling over, slid the map back into its folder. "I'll provide both parties with certified copies," he said, his tone professional but weary, like a man who's seen too many suburban wars play out in his office. Marlene didn't thank him. She gathered her papers with shaking hands, stuffing them into her oversized leather tote. Her pearls trembled against her collarbone. As she stood, she leaned close to me, her voice a hiss. "You won't get away with this. The HOA won't stand for it." I met her gaze, unblinking. "Marlene, you're standing on my land right now. So technically, you're not even allowed to make that threat without my permission." For a split second, I thought she might actually slap me. Instead, she stormed out, her heels clacking furiously against the linoleum, her board members scrambling after her like ducklings. I stayed seated a moment longer, letting the quiet settle. Then I stood, collected my copy of the plat map, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled fresher than it had in weeks. But as I reached my truck, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short, sharp, and chilling. "Enjoy your little victory. This isn't over." I stared at the screen, the words burning like a fuse. And I realized Marlene wasn't retreating. She was regrouping.